Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Rachel.
Hello, everyone.
And Mackenzie.
Hello.
And Alex.
What's up?
We're all here gathered today to discuss streaming, I guess. I think that's really the overall subject, the way we consume media and watch it, and also the part that goes along with that is sharing our logins or borrowing logins from other people. So
yeah,
Alex, I know that like you're on my Netflix account.
Yes, always.
So how does that make you feel?
You just lied to people. I'm not on your Netflix account.
Okay, I'm just kidding. But that's kind of what we're talking about. Like, what are maybe the moral complications of sharing that stuff? Is it illegal? Is it immoral? But before we go too far down that road, what's everybody binging? You know, what's your binge of choice? Could be Netflix, Hulu.
Yeah. My current binge of choice from Netflix has been a show called Last Chance U. So it's college football season. Last Chance U is, for those that don't know, is like it's junior college football. Like, so people that got kicked out of like Division I football, or they just didn't have the grades to get into Division I football, but they're really good athletes. But they go to like the middle of nowhere. The first 2 seasons, middle of nowhere, Mississippi. The last 2 seasons were middle of nowhere, Kansas. And they're just like playing to try to survive and get to the next level. And it's rough. I mean, it's rough in every sense of the word. Their living situation, their coaches on the last 2 have been rough. I would not recommend it for young ears. I mean, I think it's a good show and it's reality, but man, the language that is used.
So you can't give it
crazy.
A full recommendation.
I can't give it a full recommendation as far as language. I mean,
yeah.
But I think it's a good show, and it shows some people battling from pretty tough situations, and even I think it does bring, some good light to college football and athletes. And we had Roy on a few weeks ago who didn't have to go through that entire system, but it's crazy. It's crazy.
All right, Mackenzie, what are you watching?
I like to binge watch old seasons of reality TV. I watch Big Brother, The Amazing Race, all those types of things. Wow. I watch the whole season, but I like to know the end, so I know the winner, and then I can see the progression. It's really interesting.
Is it weird? Like, do they have a lot of like outdated references to pop culture and stuff sometimes? Or
I mean, they're locked in a house in Big Brother, so not really,
so
but
that makes sense.
But it's good, good fun.
Gotcha.
Rachel?
I think recently, well, now we can't really binge watch it because it's on TV right now, but we've had to catch up with The Good Place.
Oh, you stole mine.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one. I feel like you can't really share much about it without giving away spoilers. So I just am like, you just have to watch it. It's basically about these 4 people who die and go to heaven, essentially. But I can't say anything else because it just gives away so much. So you have to watch it in order to...
My wife and I have been watching that as well, and we caught up, and now it's sad, but I mean, we could go ahead and just spoil it now. Kidding. Please keep listening. We're not going to spoil it. I feel like I'm a very avid binge watcher. It's like one of those things where you hear, I don't know, all it really takes is like maybe a couple tweets out there of people talking about a show, and I'm like, okay, well, let's watch this. And I always do this thing where I'll help my wife. I'll say, hey, let's just watch the first episode or 2. And then if we like it, like we'll keep watching it. If it's not, we'll just give up on it. And then almost always we just watch the whole thing anyways. Even I don't know why that is, but it's kind of the way things are now. Everything's on demand. I think some of the streaming, I mean, it killed Blockbuster, right? We don't have to have our Blockbuster cards anymore. And it also like tried to combat piracy, and I think it has helped that in some ways, but I do see these providers kind of going, all right, like how do we combat people sharing their passwords and, not just using one account per household? And the other thing is like, the reason we're talking about this is partly because you're starting to see more and more streaming services pop up, right? Like we're now on the cusp of Disney Plus and Apple TV Plus coming out in November. And there's just another opportunity to share your password with friends and family, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, what are some of the implications to doing that?
Yeah, I think for me, part of like why I wanted to, or I'm interested in this conversation is because I think one of our hopes from this podcast is uncomfortable and helping us learn to disciple one another and have these conversations, and especially on uncharted territory. And I think this is uncharted territory. Even as I was trying to do research to figure out, is it legal? Is it not legal? What should we do? How should Christians respond? There's not a lot of answers out there. Not a lot of people are talking about it. There's not really an ethic established. There might be some somewhere. And so I think it's an important way for us moving into the future. This stuff isn't going away. So as we move into the future, as we disciple other people, as we have conversations around this, I think it's our responsibility to at least thoughtfully dialogue about this, because it's not going away. There's going to be more questions about it. The more of these things come out, then you get into more conversations with people that are like, hey, I want to stream this. Can I borrow this? Is it borrowing? Is it stealing? And so I think it's an important dialogue to at least begin to have and to wrestle around as disciples of Jesus around what does this look like? How do we live above reproach? How do we follow Jesus in this? And so that's why I think it's an interesting dialogue to have.
Yeah, and as far as legalities go, there's not really anything on the books that says sharing your network or your Netflix password is illegal. Like they don't want you to do it. I was doing some research as well, and I think one of the things that came up is there is like a law that courts have tried to use, but it was kind of misinterpreted because it was pretty much the law was, let's say, I worked for Alex's company and I left and I asked for a login to a resource that the company was using.
Yeah.
That would technically be illegal. And they tried to kind of use that as like leverage to say that people sharing their streaming accounts was kind of the same thing, which it is not. I mean, maybe we'll get to a point where we'll see this become a reality where they'll fight against it. I think it's also crazy that everybody's like, oh, we're cutting the cord, we're moving away from cable, and now if you start to add up all your subscriptions, you're paying at least as much as you were, if not more, unless you're sharing.
Yeah, which is I think where the conversation around the ethic comes in of sharing what you're sharing and is it stealing and all that kind of stuff. So that I think that'll be.
So who here has who is either currently sharing an account or has in the past?
I will admit to account sharing before. So we've used originally Netflix. Like I wasn't super into Netflix, and so I don't watch a ton. But my wife really wanted to get me into The Office, not like the place I work, but the show.
Like, get out of this house.
Yeah, I was like 20 years late on that, and so it began by like, hey, Dad, give me your login password. Until unfortunately, he got a new credit card. It expired, and we were like halfway through The Office, and so that all of a sudden he's like, I don't care, I don't watch it anymore. So we had to start paying for it eventually. So now I have Netflix, and I'm paying for it legally, I guess. So. And YouTube TV. We cut the cable, our dish provider. I don't want to name drop them so they feel bad and come after us, but we got YouTube TV. I loved it, and so subscribe to that. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I totally do. Like we have family members that have Netflix that we've shared accounts with, which they have like the multiple, I don't know how that works.
Profiles or whatever. Yeah,
where you can utilize like one of them. And then my parents, they had it for forever and never watched it. And so we had watched theirs until they raised their prices, and then they decided they no longer wanted it, which was fine because we weren't paying for it. And so the nice thing right now is that I get student discounts. And so I get a lot of these streaming services for cheap. So we have a lot of them right now, but I'm sure once we, once they become full price again, we'll either have to evaluate. Another thing, really quick, we have Sling, but we have friends that we actually split the cost with. And so I don't know where that falls in this conversation because
you're technically still paying for part of it, right?
Yeah, yeah. And we get like the multiple screens that you can get. And so yeah, it's just very interesting.
Well, yeah, and I think that's weird because I have streaming services like Netflix and Spotify and Amazon. I mean, but they tell you like, set your family up on this. Like, it's a family account. Like, here's these different profiles. So to me, it's kind of like, why is this supposed to be considered a bad thing when they are encouraging family profiles or have another profile or have someone join in with your account? Like, it's kind of a catch-22 of like, yeah, here we have this family thing, but don't share. So I don't know. That's kind of, I've never even really thought about it because I'm like, oh yeah, they want us to be
nobody reads
on a family profile.
Nobody reads the ULA, so that's
the end user license agreement. Is that what it stands for?
I think that's what that is.
Well, I think they do get you though with the screen limitations. So like ours will pop up and say, sorry, 2 people are already watching Netflix. So then you have that, discussion.
But then you can increase how many screens
for more streams.
Yeah. So you can be a part of that.
Yeah.
That's where I think it's just like, how do you, I mean, if you're paying for it, like, I mean, I think a lot of times in the end user agreement, it does say this is for one household. So it's like, hey, a family of 4 can all be streaming on their devices at the same time. And a lot of times though, it goes beyond that to separate households. I don't know. It's a really tough subject because I'm not in a current position where I couldn't afford those. So I think that obviously changes my perspective. If I mean, I could easily foresee someone being like, I don't have a job right now. I don't, blah, blah, blah. And like, I'm just borrowing this account from a friend. And it's really hard to just tell that person like, well, you're a criminal. Like, I'm calling the police.
Yeah. And I think the other hard part about it is like, sometimes it just happens, like not even intentionally. So like, for example, we have a YouTube TV subscription. I want to watch the Husker games. We go over to my dad's house where we're going to watch the Husker game. He didn't have it. And so it's like, I'm going to log in on his TV so we can watch it, or set up my mom a profile so she can watch, the things that she wants to watch, from our subscription and get like the benefits of those kind of things. And so it's like
just leading your family down a dark path.
And so, or Netflix, for example, my in-laws, they don't have a Netflix subscription at all. And so I feel like every time either we go to their house, and our kids, like they want to watch something or whatever, we like log out my brother and sister-in-law who have their own account, and then we log in our account because it has our kids' favorite stuff in there, and it takes off their kids' favorite stuff. So it's like this battle of like, we just logged in at someone's house so we could take advantage of it for ourselves, but then I don't know, are they using it? Are they not using it? It's not like I'm calling and following up and all those kind of things happen. So there's just so many scenarios, where you could like not even intentionally be like sharing, but then it's to your benefit, but then somebody's probably watching it later.
Well, and it even feels less bad, I guess, than like the whole BitTorrent era. Like I think people were like, you're just flat out stealing this stuff. You're downloading the media. It's on your device now. You're not just streaming it. And so now it's almost like you own it. And I think that was always a hard conversation too, because I mean, when you look at it as a software or a digital thing, it's a copy of the original. You're not taking it from someone else. It's not like I walked into the Walmart and stole the CD off the shelf and took it home. It's like if I was able to go to Walmart and just copy anything like a coffee mug or something, a duvet cover, and just take that home with me, like, would that be illegal? Because I didn't steal it. I just had the technology to copy it.
Well, and you're forced to do those things. Like I was saying, like Frozen, my kids loved Frozen for a long time. And formerly, like, we would buy the DVD and we'd have it at our house, and if they wanted to watch it at Grandma and Grandpa's house, we would take our DVD with us on the vacation, put it in the DVD player. Now, we bought the movie Frozen, but for our kids to watch Frozen, I've got to go to their Apple TV and log in, to our Apple account so that they can watch it. And then, so that's where it kind of, it's just different than having that physical borrowing thing. And so I think that's where the ethic and the gray area comes in. So,
and there's also talk about when you die, like, where does all your digital media go? Like, does your like up until recently, I think it was like when you die, if you're the owner of it, it's gone. Like you can't like pass it down to your family or whatever. And I think Apple started to change some of that.
I haven't even thought about that.
But yeah, it's like where like, I don't know, like I love movies, okay? It's like just a part of who I am. I just love to nerd out on directors and like all of that sort of stuff. So I would always buy these movies and have shelves and shelves of DVDs. And I always thought, man, when I die or whatever, my kids are going to inherit these and it's, you know, they're going to be able to see the ad was weird or whatever. But then I just got to this digital era where I'm just like, I don't even care. I don't want the shelf space. Like I started selling it off and just converting them to digital. But yeah, when a friend wants to borrow a movie from me, which I was like the Blockbuster of my family, whether it's in-laws or relatives who just wanted to watch something, I'd be like, okay, yeah, here, borrow this DVD. Now I'm loaning out my like Vudu account or something to them to log in and watch. Like, so is that bad? Should I not do that? Am I enabling them?
Yeah, I think that's why we have this conversation.
Well, and I have a question too, because I think one of our questions is this morally right? And for Christians, what is the difference between morals and sin?
Yeah.
How do we, I feel like if we are going to talk about, is this morally right? Well, and for Christians, we're talking about sin. Mm-hmm. So how do we discern, this is morally wrong, but it's not a sin?
Yeah. And part of my fear of having this conversation was if I discover it's stealing and I believe that stealing is wrong, then it becomes sinful. But if I'm ignorant to it, then I can do it without discovering it. And then I'm safe. Because I do think that's a reality, is you're accountable to the things obviously you know. And so I'm like, if I discover something, which I think I am through my research of the process, then is that going to make me uncomfortable and make me have to stop doing something that I really like to do? So
I think also too, as I was we decided we were going to do this topic, and I started praying about it and just asking kind of God what he has in this and what would he think about this. And I just felt like, man, if I feel like in college, I used to focus so much on all the little sins that I was doing and really just like, I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't do that. And it gave me a wrong view of God, because I was like, he is this God that is just so like picky at each little sin. And I need to be making sure that I'm like keeping all my sins under control and doing all of this. And I was so focused on every little sin that I wasn't even looking at like just the grace of God and the fact that I am sinful and I need God's grace every single day. And so I think that's another thing that I'm worried about is like when you talk about stuff like this, it's like we get so zoned in on one little tiny thing that we're not even realizing like the depth of God's grace and like who we are as children of God. Like our identity is in Christ. So like we've been set free from sin, like the slavery of sin. And so when we get so focused on these little things, I think sometimes it's just easy to zone in on that and forget about.
Well, and you think about someone who is struggling in any part of their life and they're already feeling like they're piled on with all of this stress and they're like, I'm trying my best to get through it. And then they listen to us go, well, if your shared accounts,
here's one more thing.
Yeah. Good luck getting to heaven now, buddy. Like that's the reality of it. Like, is it something like, where does this fall on them?
Yeah. And then there's Paul's conversation of, because grace abounds, should I continue to sin? And so, yeah, that is where this conversation is hard. And like, we're not going to set up like a legalism precedent, inside of this, or obviously a legal precedent inside of this. But I think it is a responsibility as a new thing to talk about, an ethic to navigate. So I got a couple random questions that are former things that as I was wrestling through, helped me shape some of this. Because I think one of the things is like when you have a quantity that's limited versus an unlimited quantity of something. Yeah. So for example, like if I go to a restaurant with my wife and it's a restaurant where there's free refills, is it okay, for me to order the Diet Coke and let her have a drink if there's free refills and I know, okay, she can drink it because I'm going to get more, versus if there's not a free refill and I've got a limited quantity of it, then I feel like, it's probably okay because I know she's taking out of my limited quantity versus like taking out of the company's unlimited quantity, right. And so there's that conversation. Or same with like a buffet. Like if I go to a buffet, like I can order my thing and not just like have her sit there and not eat any food or just try to share from the buffet. I'm like, I think that's wrong. Yeah. If she's not ordering anything, versus like if I just order my meal with has a burger and some fries, like I can give her that because there's a limited quantity, unless you go to Red Robin where there's limitless fries. So
Wow.
that really
Thanks for that
throws
plug.
a wrench and everything. So as I was thinking about it, what say you guys about that example? You go to Applebees, which is Mackenzie's favorite. We learned way back, feels like so long ago, we learned about your love for Applebees. And you and your husband are there, and you get the soda that's unlimited, free refills.
Unlimited riblets and chicken tenders.
Yeah. Is it okay does it change? Does that change with limited quantity versus unlimited quantity in what you're sharing?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm having kind of a difficult time with this conversation, just because, I mean, I'm going to be honest. Part of me is like, I don't see anything wrong with this. And so I think a lot of that is because, I mean, you were kind of talking about quantities, and I'm just thinking, okay, regardless of if you have a Netflix account or if I have a Netflix account, like, I'm paying a one-time fee and then I get access to that for the entire month. And so whether I watch it a little bit or watch it a lot, I'm paying the same amount. And so I just keep thinking like, okay, does it really matter though? Because I mean, as long as somebody's paying for it, that should be all that matters. That's like what I think about. But I mean, I also think about who is this hurting? Like if I'm going to take something from somebody, is it hurting the artists who made these videos, made the movies that we're watching? Is it hurting just the company? I wouldn't walk into a restaurant and steal something from the owner that, like it's a small restaurant. I wouldn't do that because I would be able to see that direct.
That bottom line of who it's hurting.
Yeah.
It's easier to see.
But when it's like a corporation like Netflix, I don't know. I think it's harder for sure.
Yeah, I agree. That makes it harder.
I think anything when it becomes quote unquote unlimited, it loses its value. Like when I think about music, now that we stream music all the time, and even before BitTorrent, like when I bought a CD, like that was like, hey, I'm listening to this CD a lot, and like it stayed in your car or wherever, or in your Walkman, and it played and played and played and played. And that CD, even when you bought like a CD that ultimately wasn't a good purchase, it was just a single that you liked on the radio, and you have to listen to this whole album, that had way more value to me because it was a limited quantity thing. Like this was all I had. This is what I spent. Now like what you spend at most $20 on a CD, and that that's more than you pay for a streaming service now per month. But now that it's like a lot of our art and a lot of our media has lost so much value because of its unlimited quantity. Like now it's just like I pay for Netflix, I pay for my music, I pay for whatever, and it's valueless because it's just like have as much as you want whenever you want it, all you can eat, kind of just go for it. And I think that's the same, like the buffet analogy works there too. Like you kind of expect you're going to get lower quality food at the Golden Corral. I'm sorry, Jeff Foxworthy, if you're listening, but like you're going to get like a lower quality meal there, even though you can have all the steak you can eat. It's not going to be, as good as an Outback steak. I'm kidding. I don't know, but I'm just saying, like,
true.
What I mean? Like, it's not going to be the quality. And so I think when anything becomes unlimited, and I mean, sure, maybe it's a moderation thing, I don't know, but it does lose its value.
Yeah, because I think if I have data, right? The times before I had unlimited data, plan, like now if somebody's like, hey, can I tether to your phone? I'm like, yeah, I don't care, because it's not going to affect me really. Like I'm not going to pay more. But when I had, 5 gigs of data, I'm like, oh, hold on, let me check, see how far I am from the end of the month.
Can use it for 5 minutes.
And so because of knowing that I had a limit, like it caused me to be a little bit more selfish, but also aware of like, there's a limit that I'm running up against.
You see that even in the medical industry, like when everything was just PPO and people were like, oh, I don't even know what I'm paying. I pay like a $20 visit, like fee or whatever. People just abused it. They just always go to the doctor for whatever reason and just buy whatever medicine without even shopping around for what other doctors are charging, or we just didn't care, and I think that's definitely changed now a little bit to where people are paying more out of pocket. But it's one of those things where when things are just when they're unlimited, it's hard to see the value in it.
Good. I did put this on on social media to kind of ask other people. I like to try to gauge people's thoughts and their interest in it. And so one story that I heard from someone was they were subscribed to the MLB network. And there's some like MLB or NFL network that are like seasonal, but they're a little bit more expensive than like a Netflix or whatever. And so this person was subscribed to the MLB. They're a huge Yankees fan. And like over the years, they said like they had just kind of given out their, password to about 20 to 25 people, Wow. And so it grew.
That's a
how
lot.
many people were like sharing this, and some were contributing, some weren't, but like there was no bottom line of them being affected by it until the day they couldn't stream anymore. They wanted to go watch the Yankees game, and they said that there was a notification to have to call like the service, and so they called them and they're like, "Hey, dude, you're trying to watch this exact same game in California and in Nebraska and a few different places. If you don't stop, we're shutting down your. We have the right to shut down the service because you paid for your stream."
Yeah.
And I think companies are combating that a little bit more, which is kind of like what you were saying, Mackenzie.
It's new ground.
Yeah, it is new ground.
We don't know what this is. This is all so new.
In the beginning, like you could stream pretty much unlimited devices, and now companies are saying, hey, you have a household that you can have 5 people set up, but like I know YouTube TV, for example, you can have like 5 or 6 people have profiles, but you can't stream more than 3 devices at one time, so that also feels like, okay, I'm not taking advantage. There is a limited quantity that I can consume inside of this. It's not unlimited. And so even for me, my sister has called, and when I've been watching a Husker game and I've had it on upstairs and downstairs and I want to check it on my phone, like if I'm outside watching the kids. And so my sister's called and she's like, hey, I can't get the game. Can you give me your password? Mom said you have one. And I'm like, no. Because I need to have all 3 streams.
I need them all to myself.
Yeah, so like that limited quantity thing does, I think, bring maybe some more. I think it's helpful for the consumer because I think it brings more ownership and more responsibility, and it forces you to think about it a little bit more. Because you're probably not going to stream and share with like 5 people if you know you only have 2 streams, because you're like, then I got to have that awkward conversation of, dang it, who's the one on? Who am I kicking off? So,
well, and the other side of it too is the infrastructure of it all. And I'm not going to nerd out too much here, but there are like Netflix and these companies, they're also looking at, hey, we're sending out all this data over the infrastructure that we have in place. And the more that we do that, the more it costs us, because they have servers somewhere with all these movies and TV shows stored on it. And the more that it's streamed out, it costs them. So if you're the more you share it, that's cutting out of their bottom line. So then their infrastructure is more poor and it can't support, streaming all of these videos or whatever. So I think that is something where, like, I'm not saying that they're hurting for money or anything like that necessarily, but there are costs involved. I know sometimes when it's internet, we don't always understand it, so it's just kind of magic, and we're like, oh, whatever. Like
it is magic.
It just does this. It just happens, and like it's fine. It's not like. And also, there's like over the air TV is still available, so people maybe kind of confuse that a little bit. Like, oh, it just shows up in my house, like it's fine. Like, I don't know.
But they are kind of creating limitations and creating different restrictions, so people can't do that. We just said so. As individuals, I mean, should we feel bad about that, or is that kind of on them, or is this like a two-way street where we shouldn't be abusing their services? They should be, utilizing whatever they can to make sure that their stuff is protected.
Well, and even the example Alex brought up with the MLB network is kind of interesting, because it's like, if you're sharing it with 25 people and they're all paying you something, you're making money at some point, right? Like, and then that even seems more illegal at that point.
And I don't know that he was
I'm not saying they were
making money on this.
But, like, everybody pay me $5 and suddenly, like, I am, quitting my job. But yeah, I think here's a question. What if I am sharing my PureFlix account with my non-believer friend to hope to witness to them?
Or Right Now Media. That's kind of the other Netflix of Christians.
Sure. I prefer PureFlix. Okay, Alex.
My bad.
No, but I mean, like, that's just another thing. It's like, it's such a gray area. Like, I'm not saying that most non-believers would probably be that interested in PureFlix, but maybe. But like, is that, I don't know. Like, it's so hard to just come to a hard line on this and say this is where it's wrong and this is where it's right.
That reminds me of the would you steal food to feed your family or something, like the ethical debate.
Yeah.
Well, and there's so many people in the Bible that lied about people being in their homes so that they could save their lives, but they were lying. So,
and God blessed them because of it.
So
ooh, getting weird.
Yeah.
So as long as you're sharing your PureFlix account, it's okay.
Yeah.
Which is even more ironic because they would probably be struggling more than Netflix or anything because of their small user base. So anyways, did you have any other questions that came through on social media or?
Yeah, mainly comments.
Oh, okay.
Someone asked me for my password. So I was like, no, I'm
you
not
went ahead and
giving
gave
those
it to
you.
him.
I
Right?
did not. And then another person was just like, yeah, me and my parents, we share an account and they don't know, like, is that bad? Is that not bad? And so I think that's the ethic. And I think why this is important is because it's going, like I said, it's going to be something that becomes more and more a debate. And to me, one of the issues, and we say this about a lot of things, is who is it hurting? Mm-hmm. Who is it hurting? And I think sometimes that's just the bad question to ask when trying to come up with, like, is this wrong or is it right? Because there's a lot of things that aren't hurting other people, but they're hurting us more than we know, Mm-hmm. So for example, when I did middle school ministry, one thing that always ticked off when I was talking about, especially like sex and purity and things like that, one thing that always ticked off parents sometimes and was when I would, stand there and I'd say, all right, so quick question for you. Whose parents think speeding is bad? And that's what I heard, that radio silence there, because every kid, I'm like, how many miles can you go over the speed limit without it being wrong? And every kid's like, my dad says 5, you can go 5 miles over the speed limit before it's wrong. It's 1, it's 2. Then there's like the one kid who's like, no, speeding's bad. You got to go 5 under,
Mm-hmm.
and so, and the question is like, if I go 5 over, who am I hurting?
It was weird that this little kid just walked into the studio.
Yeah,
just now.
so weird. That was a weird voice. The question is, who am I hurting? But I think there's like a discipleship principle there of like, how far is too far, and how far can, like, where's the line, and how far can I go over the line and cross it without getting in trouble, and so there's always that natural thing of like, we ask, how far can I get to the line, and how much can I go over it, instead of how do I stay as far away from the line as possible. And so I think that whole speeding conversation, like, literally, like, I remember a middle school or a high school trip where God really convicted me on like speeding, and I try not to, but then my wife always points out, but I see you text and drive and that's illegal too. So it's that whole like,
wow,
yeah, I know.
What a confession to make here.
I've done it,
Public confession.
Yeah, and so that's the internal battle. Like, is speeding illegal? Yes. Do I believe Jesus would speed? No. Like, I honestly am convinced that he wouldn't, because
that's because donkeys couldn't go that fast.
Because it's illegal, and so it becomes that justification thing that we like to do. How close can I get to the line? And that starts to erode at things inside of us, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's what, like, the longer you do something that is wrong and you don't get caught, the more and more you're like okay with that, and the more you want to press the limits. And so I think that's where there's some conversation around, is this good? Is this bad? And if we realize it's bad, should we continue to press that limit?
Yeah. I think also one thing that's important to point out is that it's like these types of conversations are not just to start a witch hunt. Like,
oh yeah.
Like, don't take this as fuel to be like, oh, I'm gonna go tell my friend who shares that he's bad. Like, I think it's more about, like you're saying, Alex, it's like kind of challenging yourself a little bit and going, okay, well, where are places, like, we can always be improving, we can always be doing better, and like, what's something that, like, hey, maybe I should be, because you're right, if you overlook things like this and just think, well, it's nothing, then what's that lead to? The next thing that you're gonna just kind of overlook and say, yeah, it's not a big deal. So yeah.
And I remember way before all this happened, Sling TV, or no, the Sling box,
where it shared your cable.
Yeah. So Sling box, it was like all new. So we had this box. This is like that you could plug into your cable, and you could actually like watch your own cable from anywhere. But I remember like I would share that with other people that would want to watch the Husker game while I was watching at my house. I'm like, but don't change the channel, you jerk. If you change the channel, I'm changing the password if you change the channel. Yeah. And so technology just continued to progress in this way, like from burning CDs, and then like, I'll be honest.
Are you talking about like at youth camps where you're like, I'm going to burn my Metallica?
No, like when you copied CDs.
Oh, okay.
I remember like friends, like in high school, I could make $5 because I had the computer that was good enough to burn my CD, which was illegal, right? And so this has always been and will always be a debate and a dilemma as the world turns. And that was not a reference to a soap opera. Okay. So I think that's why it's important for us to at least dialogue about it and have conversation, because I think discipleship does matter. And Paul talks about in Corinthians, like, everything is permissible, but not everything is right, Yeah. And so I think we do have to think about anything that we're doing, whether it's streaming or speeding or texting and driving or anything that's new that we don't know about. I think we have, as society and as Christians, a responsibility to at least think about how this is affecting not just others, but how it's affecting us. Is it making us more like Christ, or is it making us less like Christ? And I think that's the hard part.
Can we like talk about how you approach something like that though? When you come into a realization of something, oh man, like I just realized this is something that might not necessarily be loving God or loving people well. How do I go about that? Because I think sometimes Christians are almost like a diet culture Christian of like, I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to not like eat sugar anymore. I'm going to completely get rid of it. And then a week later we go back to doing it because it's a diet culture and it's not necessarily a lifestyle change. It's just something that you're trying to do to get rid of something. Yeah. So how do we approach that when we realize, oh, maybe there's something that is wrong or off in my life? Where do I go from there?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think the other part about a diet culture is like, because you're cutting out sugar doesn't mean everyone else is cutting out sugar, so it's not like you go to someone's house and they're partying like, what are you doing? Where's all the, and I guess some people do this, where's all the sugar-free stuff? Do you even care about gluten-free people? What do you even care about us? Where's all the, anyway. And so I think that's the other part of the diet culture is we either expect everybody else to be following us, or we just do it for a while, and then you go to that party and you're like, ooh, I remember sugar tasted really good. Yeah, give me some sugar. So I think that is that's hard. Mackenzie, what do you think about that? Diet culture.
Yeah. Well, I just was thinking with streaming services, buy the service. That's so easy to do, but for some of us that are on the poorer side, that is not that easy to do. So I can see that being hard. Well, especially when in our culture, like our culture is so, like TV shows and movies are such a big part of our culture. And so if everybody's watching a TV show, like you guys are all talking about The Good Place and I've never seen it,
FOMO,
I'm like missing out. And so how do I navigate that situation? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I'm tempted to say, hey, can I just borrow your account so I can know what you're talking about?
Well, and I think it's one of those things where it shouldn't get to the point where you are seeing the consequences of doing the wrong thing. Like I think with the MLB example, it's like, okay, now I'm kind of fearful of this. Like I shouldn't have done this, and now I'm going to stop. And I think back to even the BitTorrent days. I'll make a confession. Alex was confessing to texting and driving. I did, I do remember downloading a lot of stuff through BitTorrent, and I remember downloading a specific HBO show, and Cox Communications emailed me and said, hey, HBO has contacted us. They said that you're illegally downloading their content and they want to pursue legal action. And they were kind of the buffer and saying, hey, you should probably stop this. And I felt like I was shown grace by Cox Communications at that point. And I was scared. Like it really scared me. And I look back on that now and I go, okay, I would have just kept going down that path probably, like if I hadn't been scared. And I think, and I'm not saying that, oh, they're coming for you, Netflix is coming for you. But I do think that if it's one of those things where you're like, you can ignore it until there's consequences. Like if then maybe it's something you should at least analyze and maybe kind of look through it, in your life and say, maybe, I can try to be better at this. But it's probably like, if that's the biggest thing that you have going on, you're probably doing okay. Like if that's like, I'm just going to say, like, if that's your biggest struggle right now, like, okay, but if that is your biggest struggle, then maybe like try to be better. Right.
Yeah. It takes steps. Like for me, literally texting and driving. So one of the things I did was I went and spent money on a stereo that I could like plug in that had CarPlay, because I was like, that's going to help me literally keep me more accountable, and I can use Siri and I can use all the functions. It automatically locks my phone.
Do not disturb.
Yeah. And so all those kind of things. And so literally like, and that's why I think Apple put the whole do not disturb on there, because literally that causes death and destruction in people's lives. And so it does, and it can hurt people. And so for me, there has been like a conviction there. And yes, I still slip up because I fall into like the prey of the moment and no, I need this information right now, and like all those kind of things. And so there's grace abounding, but there's also like me knowingly saying, okay, but I don't want to abuse that. Like the passage I was talking about earlier, 1 Corinthians 10:23, I have the right to do anything, you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but not everything is constructive. And so I think that's one of those key passages that can inform this conversation. We have the right to do a lot of things, but not everything is actually beneficial or constructive towards, our lives. I remember when I was in college, my parents saying, if you can't tip, don't go out to eat. Like or don't go there, go to McDonald's or go to Taco Bell, somewhere you don't have to tip. And then like, as I was a server, I was like, thank God they taught me that. And I wish a lot of other people's parents would teach them that, because it's a bummer when you're working to serve someone and you have a product and you're serving someone and then they can pay for their food and they feel justified by that. And you're like, I just worked my butt off. And usually it's like the people that abuse it the most, like are like the hardest tables, like they're the most difficult people in the world, and the ones you got to give a million refills to and all that kind of stuff. And so I think it kind of goes back to some of that too, is like living within your means and you have to do, like, part of Christianity is doing things that, giving up your comfort, giving up convenience to be more like Christ, be made more in his image. And so I think whether it's streaming or anything in life, we can always and should always, I think, be analyzing things in our lives and saying, is this beneficial? Is this making me more like Christ, or is it pulling me away from being a witness and all that kind of stuff? So
yeah. And I think to your point, Rachel, too, it is important that if someone's listening to this right now and going, okay, well, I'm not going to do it anymore. And it's just like, and it's something and they post it on Facebook or tweet it out and say, well, I'm not doing this anymore. This is bad. I listened to the Uncomfortable podcast and they said it was bad. Like, don't let it be a fad. Don't let it you don't need to advertise it to everyone, but if it's something that you feel like you're being convicted about, then like deal with it and like pray about it, but don't make it this big like deal that like, oh, look at what I'm doing. And
I just think our, like, the culture in America, the Christian culture in America has become a do good like culture of like, if you're going to be a Christian, you have to do all the right things and check off all these marks. And that's why so many people are leaving, because it's like, man, I can't do this. I could never live up to all of these little things, because that's just like, I'm not perfect. And I think hopefully we're not leading people in that direction of like, here's another thing that you have to check off your mark if you're going to be a good Christian.
Right. That would be, we would have done the wrong thing at this point, if that's what you're taking away from this.
Or the opposite happens. They don't leave, but they get better at hiding. You know? And so like that's the inverse of the do good thing, is like we become bouncers to our church community, and we say who can get in and who can get out based on how clean they appear. Yeah. And none of us appear clean. Like none of us have a good slate. And so we fear, and then we start to hide things in our lives. And then all of a sudden, because of that, and our lack of authenticity and our lack of being able to admit and confess things in our own life in safe, appropriate places, we just get better at hiding things, which is not good. No, it does maybe even more damage to us. So right. There you go. Don't
don't share your streams, I guess.
But this is free, so you can share this with anybody for free.
It's free entertainment. So now that you've canceled your Netflix subscription, I'm just kidding.
You can check it out on YouTube, or if you've been sharing Spotify illegally, you can find it on a lot of other places.
Oh man, no, but I think this is hopefully encouraging people to just say, hey, let's have these conversations. Let's kind of dissect these things. And I think navigating technology right now, it's in its infancy, and these services haven't been around very long, and maybe it's something we'll look back on and go, oh wow, man, I can't believe Netflix put Alex in jail. That's so weird. But it's one of those things where we just kind of have to try to have these conversations and be okay with that, and be okay with maybe being wrong about this or whatever. But don't be ashamed of it, and don't hide it, and don't let it lead you to something else. But all right, does anybody else have anything else to add, or did we reach our conclusion?
Yeah, I think we reached
a conclusion, right?
Yeah.
I really appreciate all you being here and having this conversation. And here's to more uncomfortable conversations in the future. And if you're listening, we would appreciate any feedback you have. You can send it to us on social media at CCC Omaha, or you can email us, not mail. You can send a postcard, I'm sure, if you want to find our address. That'd be great. But you could also email us at podcast@cccomaha.org. And we, next week I want to tease a little bit. We are going to be talking about Halloween. So if you're into spoopy podcasts, you can check out that one. The lead pastor, Mark Ashton's going to be with us then, and a special guest I'll let you be surprised by.
Yeah, very special.
So, thanks everyone, and we'll see you all next time.